Under the Shared Value Foundation, we have the Shared Value Hub, which was formed to transition climate action and support different entrepreneurs who are part of, who play an important role to contributing to climate action in one way or another. So what we do is we help different entrepreneurs, especially those in the circular economy sector, those in the circular economy sector to develop sustainable businesses and to ensure that their businesses are very impactful. So I won't take much time. Without further ado, let's dive into the discussion. And before I give a brief explanation on what we're going to discuss today, I would like to give the panelists a chance to introduce themselves, where they are from, where they work, and what kind of work they do around plastic waste. In the panelists, we have Carol, Keiran, and we have Gladys, Kivati, and then we also have Jacob Olonde. So we'll just start with Mr. Green, and then followed by Sustainable Business Consulting, and then lastly, we go to Jacob. So go ahead, Carol.
Well, I guess from Mr. Green, it's me, Keiran. Hi, everybody. Pleasure to be here. So I'm Keiran. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Mr. Green Africa, based in Nairobi, Kenya. And what we do as Mr. Green, we basically make the informal market and the informal players like waste pickers and other middlemen, we make them part of the broader solution for the plastic challenge that we have, and we integrate them into a sustainable and sort of really fair and inclusive value chain that goes all the way back into the FMCG brand owners who want to use recycled material in their packaging. So pleasure to be here, and thank you.
Thank you so much, Keiran. We'll go to Gladys.
Yeah, good afternoon, good morning from wherever it is you're dialing from. My name is Gladys Kivati. I'm a lead consultant and founder of Sustainable Business Consulting. This is a B Corp certified institution located in East Africa. And what we mainly do is we support businesses within the circular economy space, looking at different waste streams. And a particular interest for us is those involved in the plastic waste stream. And so we are very happy to be here today. And what we do is we support businesses with technical advisory as well as ESG support, even for businesses in this particular space. So I think we'll be discussing more on our approach even as we delve into the topic of the session today. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Gladys. It's a pleasure to have both Mr. Green and Sustainable Business Consulting on board. I'd like to give an opportunity to Jacob from ACAS Institute. Jacob, if you're in the meeting, kindly introduce yourself before we start off. Okay, so I don't think I can see Jacob here, but in case I missed you, Jacob, just kindly notify me on the chat box. So without further delay, we'll just dive into the conversation. So today here, we're talking about plastic waste. And more specifically, we want to talk about the role of private sectors and B Corps in terms of plastic waste management. So at the global level and national and local level, there's increased action to address concerns around plastic waste and the environment. And in this session, we explore the role of plastics in our society and how existing recycling and reprocessing infrastructure can be improved and enhanced to capture and recycle more plastic wastes, avoiding escape into the environment. So I'd like to go directly to pose a question to Gladys, and then Keiran, also you can also hop into this and expound on the same, having in mind your business models, especially in these times of COVID-19. I would like you to talk a little on the role of the private sector and B Corps in shaping and implementing plastic regulations currently. So go ahead, Gladys. The floor is yours.
Yeah, actually, I thought this would be a question for Mr. Green because he's a big of specifically in the plastic waste stream. Keiran, do you want to take this up, or I can try answer?
Well, we can do this in collaboration.
Okay.
So, but you can share your thoughts first, and then I can share a little bit our journey on this
Okay.
and why we believe this approach from a B Corp perspective and impact measurement perspective in general.
Yeah. So maybe I can just speak around the B Corp perspective and here speaking around some of the businesses we work with, and of course, B Corp being a movement, what it mainly stands for. So, of course, being part of the B Corp community, what we believe in is responsible business. And for any B Corp that really wants to consider, say, plastic recovery as part of its operations, I think it's really an ideal situation because the question is, what are the opportunities around, say, single-use plastic, for lack of a better word. And so in this particular case, we realize that the more you reduce, say, the amount of plastic, say, in your supply chain or even in your operations, you find that, you're trying to reduce the amount of waste into
em outros países.
I think there's someone who is on.
Então, esse modelo funcionando com você, para alguns que sejam.
Is it that we have a translator?
Sorry, kindly ensure you're muted speaking.
Yeah.
Gladys.
Yeah, so I don't know at what point I left off, but yeah, looking at the role of the private sector in plastic recovery, and I think what I was trying to say in this particular case is, most businesses were in the B Corp movement. What we all aim for is sustainable business practices, and one ways of ensuring that your operations really are not having a negative impact on the environment is aging out waste. Looking at your supply chain, looking at your value chain, is it possible for you to actually ensure that you're reducing the amount of waste, in this particular case, plastic, taking into consideration that plastic is non-biodegradable, meaning the moment it lands on, say, in the ecosystem or on any surface, it either ends up, somewhere polluting a certain environment. And of course, there's this whole discussion around aesthetics. And so for our business operations, I think looking at how business can actually position themselves around this whole topic around plastic recovery is trying to age out plastic in the operation. Is it possible for you, even in your office, even in your household, is it possible for you to actually reduce the amount of plastic you're using? Because if we do that, each and every person actually reduces the quantity of plastic in their ecosystem, we see that we are aging out waste. And this is where I think Mr. Green comes in with trying to recycle waste into value. And so then I'll hand over to Mr. Green just for him to explain to us how his business is actually operationalizing this whole concept of aging out waste as well as recycling. Keiran, over to you.
Sorry, yeah. Thank you so much. I think from if we dissect it a little bit in a couple of compartments, as Gladys has said, I think the waste reduction is a key element. Overall, reducing the footprint around plastics in supply chains, procurement systems, and things like that. But I think also the private sector can play a really big role around producing products where we think more towards end of life or post end of life of the product. If you consume something, what happens with the packaging then? And I think the design for recyclability is super, super important to participate around plastic. So not only reducing plastic waste, but also the plastic waste that we do produce, designing it in a way, the packaging, the products, that they can go back into a recycling stream. So that's, I think, a very key trend that is happening around the private sector and in the discussions in and around plastics. And then at the same time, you know, as we design, as we use and reduce plastic, I think it's also very, very critical to create kind of like a demand for recycled plastic. So plastic that has been able to be retrieved from end of life, coming back into a system and using that same plastic in products of within the private sector. And a really good example is what we've been able to do together with Unilever is launch Kenya's first packaging made out of 100% recycled plastic. And not only was it recycled plastic, but it was also local recycled plastic. So locally collected, locally recycled, and locally made into a packaging again. And I think that's sort of system towards closing the loop and circularity of plastic is super, super critical as engaging in the private sector. And I think then from a B Corp lens, it's already amazing how, and this is one of the reasons why we as a company wanted to be B Corp certified. It gives us a governing overall framework on how we can rate ourselves and how can we grow our impact. You know, the business as a force for good has been at the core of Mr. Green Africa from day one. And so, but what we've never been able to do so far is really measuring that growth in our impact, right? And now with this sort of framework that is there in place, we can year over year in a cycle, we can grow and rate ourselves and see, did we grow the points from a B Corp perspective? Were we able to get more points over time, right? And if we do, and if we did, we obviously grew our impact, you know? And so that's really the element of how we think about this. And I think in addition to that, around, we talk about plastics from a B Corp standard point of view, I think it's important to also consider the element of how much more can we go. Sorry, there's a little bit of noise here. Good, all good. Yeah, so how can sort of even the framework within B Corp think a bit more and concretely and practically around and rate supply chains around plastics. I think this will also be a big driver on how B Corp can influence like-minded organizations on thinking around plastics, you know, so and rating around, you know, how much does the products that they sell contribute to circularity? How much do the products contribute to reducing plastic waste? How much do the products that they use recycled material in their products and things like that? I think those are all potential ratings that from a B Corp standpoint of view can really drive change and business as a force for good from a plastic standpoint.
Okay, thank you so much, Gladys and Keiran, for that. Just a quick reminder, in case you need any further clarification or in case you have any question that's, you know, it's propping up from the discussions, please just put it on the chat box and we'll have someone address it. And yeah, I do agree with you, Keiran and Gladys. We have to think about the end product, you know, and think about redesigning plastic waste to enable it become more circular. And I want us to, you know, talk a little about the common challenges that companies face in combating plastic waste currently, and a little bit on how to combat these challenges and how to overcome these challenges. So I would like to give this to Keiran. You can start, and then Gladys can add on in case you have any more points to add on. So go ahead, Keiran.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think this is also really just from my observations, what those challenges bear. I'm sure there are many more challenges for various different supply chains, but I think we should also not forget plastic has many good benefits in terms of packaging, in terms of conservation of especially food packaging, bringing certain products to the consumers, to low-income consumers in an affordable way, right? So if we consider all the reasons why plastics are in our environment, you know, I think the key challenges are and will be for organizations to actually do that change, you know. So we've been so much in a linear system for decades that now to change over into a more circular system bears its challenges, right? And it's not a button we can press from one day to another to move and switch over, right? And as much as, especially in the plastic industry and the plastic value chain, there's so many players involved. You know, the amount of time and effort it actually took for Mr. Green Africa to launch together with Unilever this product that is made out of 100% recycled took quite some time. Yeah, and the reason why it took some time is there's the willingness from, you know, the corporate, the end buyer and customer who wants to launch this product more in a more sustainable way. But then there are also other value chain players within between using recycled material all the way to converting it into the packaging and then bringing it to the shelves, right? And so all these value chain players, they have all different stages of understanding and awareness of what they need to contribute to the solution, and that takes time. Yeah, and despite the fact that there needs to be, you know, supply chains that are effective in collecting this plastic waste, processing it into the qualities that are required, etc. And so I think those are all key challenges to now looking at using recycled material, the changeover. And then there are obviously also challenges in sort of adapting, the consumer adapting and making sure the consumer is getting used to the new thing, the lighter packaging. Reducing plastic waste in the packaging might be, oh, it's now less of a good packaging or less of a good product, and it could change perceived consumer value and things like that. So that's why, from what I've seen around this topic and addressing this challenge, is not as fast as we would like.
Thank you so much, Keiran. I agree, because this whole issue is multi-sectoral. There are different players and they need to come in place to combat these challenges and make the whole system more adaptable to all the key players. Gladys, would you like to add?
Yes. Yes, so I think mostly, especially for people who would like to get, say, in Mr. Green Africa space. I know Mr. Green Africa, in terms of his business model, it's actually grown, and I think he's also mentioned that it's taken a while, and he's lucky because he's gotten quite some corporate support. But then we also have businesses, these intermediaries, because if you look at the plastic value chain, we have different players, especially those who are assembling, those who are processing in low volumes, and and maybe I'm sure Mr. Green Africa is processing in large volumes at this stage. But we have those intermediaries who are in the middle, who are still part of the value chain, and they are very important. We even have waste speakers who are part of the value chain. And what we're seeing, especially regarding your questions, there are some of the challenges because most people who are in the plastic business or who are in the value chain, even from consumers, because as consumers, we consume plastics, there's a lot of lack of knowledge as well as skills and capabilities on how to actually convert plastic into value. So looking at the end of life of this plastic, and so you see there's a lot of rudimentary ways of recycling, and even for consumers, the whole knowledge around, especially in Africa, and in this particular case, even for those living in low-income settlements, how does one properly dispose? We are seeing solutions of segregation of waste, but where are these segregation equipment being placed? They're being placed in high-end, in middle-class areas. So how do you ensure that even someone who is living in a low-income area can actually be able to get the skills and knowledge on segregation and what have you, because the biggest consumers of plastics and users are those ones living in the low income market. So I think some of the challenges is just this lack of knowledge and skills, and as well as capability to do more of for people, for even businesses to benefit from circular product design, because it's a good concept. It's a concept worth, getting on board with, but then we have the capacity and skills to
Tira
make
para mim
this.
só o umidade na geladeira, bro.
Yeah, there's some noise. And of course, most importantly, it's around the business opportunity. So as a business, as sometimes we work a lot with businesses who are in different waste streams, and this whole issue around circularity, what's the business opportunity? Unless maybe you get financial support or investment from someone who has the money and who has the vision and the passion to really promote circular economy. It's difficult to finance some of these operations, and I'm sure Keiran can tell you the investment, the capital required for you to run such a business, it's huge. And so the whole idea is, how do you actually ensure that these business opportunities are co-financed, or even private sector, or even the corporate community, and even the investment community getting on board with this particular plastic recovery. Because at least for Kenya, we've seen there's been a lot of growth in this particular sector, because of course there was a policy to ban plastics, but then the polythene bags. So there's a lot of innovation that has an investment that has gone into looking for alternatives, and this is where you saw a lot of small and growing businesses and get into this whole designing and coming up with new businesses to replace the polythene bags. But hey, there's a lot of investment that is required to really ensure that plastic and circularity, especially in this sector, really takes center stage.
Thank you, Gladys, for that. I do agree. Investment is also, a very big challenge in Kenya currently and other parts of Africa. So I believe that more people need to invest in this industry to create a bigger impact. And just to add on that, Mr. Keiran, there's a question from Slowdown, Mr. Plastic Organization. I hope I pronounced that very well. And it's on your point on designing of packaging. So he would like to know if the well-designed packaged products cost higher than the ordinary ones, and how would private sectors persuade customers to actually buy the products? Maybe you can answer that, Keiran, before we move on.
Yeah, sure. I think, well, I mean, designing is one part. So if we think about designing for recyclability, then I think most cases there is a case to have at cost, at the same price that the packaging was before, or even cheaper. So as you change your packaging sort of design, there's obviously reduction in plastic is a big one that saves you use less raw materials to produce the same packaging. So reduction design, and then making sure the right combination of different types of plastics are there so that they can come back. For a good example is PT. It has two types, or even sometimes three types of plastics in the past in the packaging, right? So there's the bottle, then there's the cap, and then there's the label. So if you make sure that these three types of plastics are synergetic to one another in a way that they can come back easily in the recycling process, is for example the label on is PVC is very bad combination with PET. So if you make sure the label is PE, similar to the cap, the separation process becomes all of a sudden much easier, and creates value for the bottle itself and the cap and the label that will be the same type of plastic, right? And all of a sudden you have increased the so-called street value of your bottle that comes back into the loop. And so that kind of design is really just thinking of substituting and being smart about the raw material inputs that are being used to produce the packaging. And so from that perspective, it doesn't necessarily have to be more expensive. And in the end, it creates more benefits because you make it more recyclable. And then when it comes to using recycled material in that same packaging, being food grade certified, etc., I think they're the same as normal market dynamics play a role, demand and supply. So I think here again, from our perspective, we have been trying to be at cost or be even below the virgin price. So there's even an economic incentive for using recycled material in that packaging for the brand owners, for the manufacturer, and to make the switch quicker. Yeah. So it doesn't have to be more expensive in a nutshell.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Keiran. I hope the question is answered. So I want us to, to dive deep and talk about what options are there and explore the options that are there to improve waste management and reduce plastic use and increase recyclability in the region. And as you answer this question, maybe you can mention something small about the current state of plastic waste in Kenya, how it looks like, in your opinion as well. So I would like Gladys to start on this, and then Keiran, you will add on after.
Yeah, thank you, Rita. And I would say, like, in terms of the quantities of plastics, I may not have the actual statistics, but what we've seen, especially as a result of COVID-19, we've seen there's been an increased amount of PPEs and packaged goods. I can give an example of, for instance, hotels were closed, and so most people went to, were either carrying packaged foods and what have you. But then, of course, looking also in the health sector, there was a lot of reliance on PPEs as well as increased use of plastic. And of course, we've seen that COVID-19 has really led to a significant spike of plastic waste. And of course, it's created more of a significant challenge for emerging markets. But I think also what COVID-19 in every business sector, what we've seen, not only has it brought challenges, but also it's created an opportunity for say, innovation, especially in recycling. And so we are seeing people now thinking of how can they actually, innovations around how can we actually deal with this menace that is here, because I think COVID-19 is here with us to stay. But now is how do businesses actually innovate to reduce, the problem of plastic waste, because as Keiran mentioned, plastics are not bad, it's just the end of life that really is a problem. And in this particular case for Africa, and even just for Kenya itself, we don't really have a waste management system that really works. I wouldn't say it doesn't work, it's just that there's just lack of coordination among value chain actors. Of course, waste picking is more a municipality function, like it's being spearheaded by the county governments and by the national government. But then now we have private players who are also coming into the ecosystem and just trying to contribute to keeping the clean cities and recycling different waste streams. So we see that there's a really big role that the business can actually play in liaison or working together with the government and just trying to contribute to this menace that is brought about by plastics. And I think every time, because we work a lot with small and growing businesses, and one of the key things we speak around is in circularity. The concept is just innovation and having someone within your team who has, say, the technical expertise of separation of the waste and also separations of the different plastics. I think Keiran had also mentioned, the different types of plastics that are there in the market. So it's around how do you either innovate to develop a product that is demand driven from the plastic you're recycling, as well as trying to have the technical skills around the separation of waste.
Thank you, Gladys. And before you answer the question, Keiran, I've seen an amazing comment by, I think it's a question, Mari Pennanen. I hope I've pronounced that very well. So she says, how about big bags, 1,000 to 1,500 kgs used by mining industries for processing chemicals they need for processing ores to metals. Who should be responsible for recycling that, and how can that be enforced? Maybe Keiran, you can answer that very quickly, or Gladys.
Well, I can try. I'm not sure familiar what those, I'm assuming those are the sort of post packaging bags that are being used. So I assume they might be plastics. And so I think it's really just a matter of understanding which kind of value chain they could go into process, but technically, depending on the plastic type, they definitely can be sort of washed, recycled, and brought back into the same bags again, etc. And I think it's more of a question: how many of these big bags are there? Could they be mixed with another material stream so that it becomes economically viable to do so? The challenge the recyclers always face is volumes and scale in order to have consistent streams that are the same, that it can be brought back into the system. So I think that's that, and ideally the people who should be responsible to make sure that these types of bags after use are being recycled is the miners themselves, or the industry themselves, who use it and empty those bags and use it where they become effectively waste, right? And so responsible disposal, responsible recycling is actually in their docket to find a solution, be it with a partner, a recycling partner, or be it in-house solutions, etc. There are many ways to go about it.
Thank you, Keiran. That answer actually brings to light the producer responsibility law, that whoever produces the plastic waste will be responsible for cleaning and recycling the waste. The more you produce, it means that the more you have to be more responsible to handle this plastic waste and actually pay more for it.
Rita, I think you're on mute again.
Sorry. Yes, so as I mentioned, thank you so much for that, Keiran, and bringing to light the producer responsibility law. And so I would like to take you back to the question that Gladys had started on answering, and just to get your opinion on it. That is, what options are there? What options do exist in terms of improving waste management and reducing plastic use and increase recyclability in the region, Kenya, having Kenya in mind, and Africa, and just mentioning a little on what is the current state of plastic waste recycling in Kenya? How does it look like?
So let's break it down. I think there's 3 key stakeholders who need to be part of it. I mean, there are many more, but I think the 3 ones that I would like to highlight is the consumer. So all of us in this room today, virtual room today, can contribute, especially when we get solutions that we can engage on, that are convenient, that are rewarding, I think is one key thing. So for us as consumers, I think we can be conscious on, as we buy packaging that is responsibly produced, be it made out of recycled material, be it recyclable packaging, etc. I think that's kind of like the vote with our money, with our wallets on the teller. But then also, once we consumed the products that are in this packaging, responsibly dispose them and engage with the solutions that are there and demand more solutions, right? Because the more the solutions that are being demanded and being used, the more encouragement from, be it private sector or other organizations, to actually offer these solutions to the consumer, right? So I think that's one. Then the second part is obviously the big leverage that we have in the private sector is the fast-moving industry that are producing these packaging for the consumers, and really being a couple of steps ahead to offer these sustainable solutions, packagings to the consumers, and really wanting to transition from virgin material to more recycled materials, and reducing their overall plastic packaging footprint in general. And then the final piece and stakeholder group is obviously government, with certain policy makings and smart policies, not necessarily advocating for a ban. I think it's more sort of really thinking through how can private sector and government and these policies work together to ensure that there's an overall incentive for all the stakeholders involved, to make sure that we make waste, not waste, but more something valuable that can be passed on and create sort of jobs and obviously a better environment. So that's, I think, those three key things on what we can do. And I think the state of sort of the plastic industry in Kenya, the great thing is the plastic sector, the plastic from Virgin perspective, has woken up. I think they do want to change. They do want to transition. They also acknowledge that it requires significant investment to do these transitions. It requires more companies like Mr. Green Africa to engage in collection to serve more consistent, reliable, quality products into the sector. But I think the sector, all stars are aligned to transition towards that in the next 5 to 10 years in a successful way, right? And the beauty I think we have in Kenya and in other emerging markets in the global south is that we can truly leapfrog into a circular economy. Europeans or countries and American states, they have other challenges that they face because they already have existing infrastructure, and now starting to transition into a circularity, a certain infrastructure, existing infrastructure like incineration and things like that, they rely on high valuable burning plastics. And so if that plastic is being sort of diverted away into more circular solutions, they will have lack of energy, and then their business models are under threat. And so what the Europeans and Americans are struggling with is actually transitioning out of these heavy asset investments that have been done, that have investment horizons over 20, 30 years, and so breaking through those barriers is actually hard. And so I think that's the beauty for us here in the global south, is we can leapfrog and to do it right from the beginning.
Thank you so much for that, Keiran. I agree. And, having having a multi-sectoral approach is very important. And this brings in the aspect of, knowledge and awareness. So if all the key sectors are in line and they're aware of the importance of moving to a more circular system, and how they're going to benefit from this and having an incentive, it will really, really push the change that we're looking for and the change that is desirable. So this is to the rest of the audience. Keep putting in your questions in the chat box for the panelists to answer. And I'd like to pose a question to Keiran. You've mentioned about the model that you're using, and I'd like to know more about the model that Mr. Green Africa is using and how the COVID-19 pandemic has affected the model in any kind of way. So just speak a little on that and before we proceed.
Sure, happy to. So I think in principle, there's two key forces that are the foundation of Mr. Green Africa. So force number one is what we do is technology enabled, from a software perspective, but also from a hardware perspective. So processing plastic into high quality hardware, but then also tracking and tracing and buying the plastic, aggregating the plastic is from a software perspective, enabling that to do thousands of many smaller transactions in a decentral way. And the second foundation of what we do is really around the way we want to buy plastics. It needs to be fair, it needs to be inclusive. And the way we want to process the plastic needs to be local. We don't believe into the element of what you see in many other commodity industries, extracting the raw material from the country of origin and then doing the value addition outside of that country. And so for us, what has been very key from day one is that we buy the plastics, we aggregate it, we process it, and do the highest possible value addition here in Kenya for the region. And so that's sort of I think the key foundational pillars for the business. And if in a simplified terms, the way we do it is really we copied and applied principles from fair trade that you see in banana, tea, and coffee industries, and the way we include waste pickers and informal sectors that are engaged already in the collection and aggregation of plastic. We applied pretty much this principle of fair, transparent pricing that we want to pass on to the people who are already engaged, and ultimately improve their quality of life, upgrade their definition, and change basically the job waste picker. And so what we've built is a sort of a fully integrated system. So we have a collection system, that has decentral buyback centers, trading points in the city of Nairobi, Kisumu, and sort of peri-urban cities, that allows us to buy plastics from pickers, people, anybody who wants to sell plastics. We buy them per kg. We typically buy them between 20 and 30% higher than sort of the general informal trade chain does it. And then we reverse logistics, the material that we bought, the feedstock that we bought, we bring it to our factory in Nairobi. We process it into high quality post-consumer recyclate sort of pellets that can now be brought back into any type or many various different applications, but predominantly packaging applications, because our customers are fast-moving consumer brands. Yeah, and so that's really sort of in a nutshell the model of what we do. And as I mentioned, the way we do that, we enhance and we leverage software, hardware technology to do that in the most efficient way. And because we add so much value here locally, it allows us to redistribute that value upstream to the people who collect it, and hence why we pay that much more in the sector. So that's what we do.
Thank you so much, Keiran, for that, for shedding some light about your business model. And, you know, it's very interesting to me, and Shared Value Foundation is an organization because our core values include, you know, a business or an enterprise or a project should be not only profitable, but have an impact to the society around it, and as well as, you know, to the environment. Yeah. So having your business model, having the collectors as one of the core beneficiaries, you know, and trying to improve their ways of living is very, very important and makes it more impactful and have a long-lasting impact. So I'd like us to shift the conversation to businesses, and more so I would like us to talk about opportunities for businesses to drive innovation and change in the way they handle their plastics after fast use. And more specifically, I'd like to pose a question to Gladys. How can different businesses or businesses in general integrate circular economy principles in their operations and their business models? Go ahead, Gladys.
Yeah, thank you, Rita. Yeah, as I keep saying, circularity is around innovation, and one of the things that business can actually do when you're dealing with any waste stream, and in this particular case, in plastics, you know, the first thing you need to do is just engage your team. You know, this is, I think Keiran has mentioned it, is around collective action. And at a business level, what you need to do is just looking at your operations. You need to brainstorm with your team and just innovate and think of ways of how can we engage together to either, you know, design out wastes, be it paper waste, be it plastic waste, any waste within your business operation. So the first thing is engaging your team. And then, of course, we are looking at circularity from a design thinking perspective. And here, when you're thinking about design thinking, we are seeing that we are looking at the three principles of circular economy. That is, first of all, designing out waste, and then keeping products and materials in use for longer, and then, of course, regenerating the natural system. And so here we are thinking around, even as you engage your team, having that design thinking approach, you know, as you're innovating, how do we actually use design thinking as a concept, even as you are innovating around this particular topic? If we have plastics within the office, if we have plastics within our supply chain and our value chain, how is it possible for us to use the design thinking concepts, you know, to really come up with how do we rethinking how we redesign our products? This is mainly for people who manufacture, say, products that are made out of plastics, or who are in different manufacturing sectors. We realize that plastics is a raw materials for most of the things you use. You look at your household, how many items do you have that are made out of plastics? So there's really a big opportunity, and for us really to take this to the next level. And I think Keiran mentioned it, as in as a consumer going to the market and preferring, plastics that are, reusable plastics, as a way of trying to really eliminate the waste, and as well as for those manufacturers who are designing products, like, is it possible for you to think around rethinking design and how your business actually can optimize the business value of circularity. The third thing is, of course, rethinking your business model. And why rethinking your business model is very key if you're a business. We see that a lot of one of the disadvantages of having plastics in your business operations is, of course, that end of life. But of course, sometimes in most businesses we can't do without plastics, or even items or equipment that is made out of plastic. So what we normally ask businesses to do is to just rethink your business model. Is it possible for you to get products that you can actually use for longer? And of course, there is also this whole idea around return. Is it possible? It's happening with Philips. I don't know if it's happening here locally. I think it's happening a lot in the developed countries, where you have this, you go to the supermarket, you can actually refill whatever it is you've bought, or you can actually return, like for Philips. So they have this buyback product, or they can even just return it and upgrade your product to a better product. So these are all opportunities for business to actually innovate and strategize around this whole idea of circularity, and ensuring that we are transitioning to plastic recovery. But most importantly, it's teams sitting together and rethinking their business model. How can we use circularity to reduce our expenses, to ensure efficiency, and most importantly, to just bring around change, change, and of course, reduce the adverse effects that plastic actually have on the environment. And of course, there are different institutions that are already doing this. We have PETCO, this whole idea of producer responsibility. Of course, it's happening with the multinationals, which of course you mentioned, Rita. Now we have another institution, I think it's called KenPro. It's also looking at different waste streams. And these are all collective actions and institutions that are bringing producers being responsible. There's a time I saw a video around waste colonialism. Of course, we have the big brands that are responsible, for producing waste, and they're the biggest producers of plastic waste, and of course they're polluting. They're polluting everywhere. But then now with this producer responsibility, we are seeing there's an opportunity for them to reduce the adverse effect. If it's working, I'm not very sure, but at least we are seeing some movement around that area. But I think for business, it's an opportunity for you to be resilient, to survive, and just reduce your costs by just thinking around circularity in your.
Okay, thank you so much, Gladys. And I am happy that you brought that to light. So shifting to a more sustainable and circular method does not have to be expensive, and it's actually an opportunity for businesses to explore the business models and actually find areas and opportunities for innovations. And this can actually, increase their income in one way or another and reduce the cost of operation. So this is just a call to businesses to, to analyze their systems and the models and identify these loopholes and opportunities that exist for them to be more circular. So Keiran, do you have something to add on that point, on how businesses can actually, become more circular?
No, I think it was very well laid out, and maybe sort of a more even practical and very concrete step. Is in the procurement process that, as businesses, we're using consumables, we're using pens, we're using paper, we're using batches, we're using so many things. And so I think as part of this procurement cycle, and as we create requirements and categories and criteria in order for us to buy certain things that meet specs for our procurement process, I think this whole notion of looking at something more sustainable, looking at something that is made out of recycled, something that is more longer lasting, as mentioned, etc. I think is a super great systemic way to institutionalize change, right? So it's not isolated on one project. It's actually from a process point of view on how we conduct business, it needs to meet the criteria of, longevity. It needs to meet the criteria of maybe recycled content and things like that. So defining that can have a very long-lasting systemic change, because if multiple organizations do that at the same time, the suppliers of these items, they will have to strategically change, right? And so in a very easy way, process change, you can actually have a ripple effect all the way downstream to the peoples and the vendors who want to plug into your systems and businesses. And I think that's a very concrete proposal on how to go about it.
Thank you so much, Keiran. So we're about to wind up, and I would like to give the opportunity to the panelists to give their last remarks. And as you do that, I would like you to give us your personal opinion on where you see Kenya and Africa in general in the next 5 years as far as recycling plastic waste is concerned. And as you answer that, I would like anyone, or for example, anyone who's interested in partnerships, who is in the, in the congregation, to just type in their contact details, if it's email address and all that. So I would like to give this opportunity to Gladys to start off, and then you, Keiran, to finish off.
Yeah, I think for me, where I see, Kenya, Africa going is, I think my biggest win is just, changing human behavior, on how we consume, how we purchase, how we make decisions around, preferred consumables, and in this case, plastic consumables. So I think a big win for me would be, if at all, the behaviors can transition in a more long-term thinking and, using recyclable and having just a positive social and environmental impact in thinking, and people just making the right decisions on how they consume. You don't need to hold a conference and everyone has a bottle of water, get a dispenser. You don't need to have 5 pens in your office. You don't need everything you have in your household. Is it possible for us to really consume a little and just reduce our purchase, and if at all we have to purchase something, let's make decisions that are, let's purchase recyclables and let's push this agenda, especially to the at a policy level if possible, but also let's influence each other, because when you influence your fellow business, when you influence your fellow neighbor, it becomes a trend, and we start seeing consumer behavior, and that's where institutions like Mr. Green Africa will thrive, because their business model is centered around circularity and bringing into business consumables that are recycled and have less detrimental effect to the environment.
Thank you so much, Gladys, for that and for your wonderful insights for this discussion. You have been very helpful. So over to you, Keiran, for your remarks and your view on where Kenya would be in the next 5 to 10 years in terms of plastic waste management.
Well, I think from my side, really just thank you for having us. Thank you for giving us the platform to speak a bit in general about this topic, but also about Mr. Green Africa. And I think my prediction for where we're going to be in 5 years, we'll definitely have much more aware consumers. We'll have more brand owners who will have done the switch and the changeovers. But I think, and I truly hope that actually Kenya can be one of these emerging countries, role model countries for the global south, on how the transition can happen on a corporate level, manufacturing level, policy, collaboration, and really setting the sort of the path for a circular economy within Kenya or the region. And similar how we have been from an M-Pesa point of view, the role model for mobile money and things like that. I hope we can affect the same change when it comes around plastics and creating circularity with these plastic fractions locally.
Thank you so much, Keiran, for that, and Gladys as well. And I do believe Kenya has so much potential in terms of, changing the systems to be more circular, and it requires a multi-sectoral approach, both the private sector, the government, and also the consumers themselves to have a mind shift and, contribute to the same. So there's a comment that someone would like to get in touch, Muna. So please, Keiran and Gladys, drop your contact details on the chat box. And also anyone who would like to, to reach out to anybody, any organizations present in the meeting, you can also drop your contact details on the chat box as we drop off. I would like to thank everyone who took the time to take part in this discussion. It has been very amazing. There has been amazing insight from the discussion. Thank you so much, Keiran. Thank you, Gladys, for taking part in this. Until next time, you're free to live. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.